The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. Here today for an episode of Canola School with Sean McKnight, who's a technical marketing manager with BASF and a self-proclaimed herbicide nerd. So we're going to be talking about, obviously, what's in a formulation. So let's break it down. You know, what do you think is the most important thing for growers to know about what's in a formulation?
Wow, that's a huge question. I think what's important to know is that there's more than just an active ingredient in a formulation. So, you know, as a grower or an agronomist, you look at a label and it might say, you know, for example, like 150 grams per liter glufosinate ammonium for something like Liberty 150, but there's a ton of different things that go into a formulation. There can be solvents and buffering agents and, you know, anything that keeps that thing in solution. And then probably most importantly would be the surfactants and the adjuvants that are in that jug of chemical as well.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about the surfactants and adjuvants, because I feel like that can be sort of a misunderstood piece. What is the purpose of them? You know, what are the differences? Yeah, talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So we use those words kind of interchangeably, and they, you know, kind of mean the same thing, but there's a couple differing things in terms of surfactants and adjuvants and considerations, I guess. And so when we talk about surfactants, generally when you're talking about a surfactant, it's something that modifies the surface tension of water. And so, you know, you might think of your non-ionic surfactants or cationics, and basically the purpose of them is to, again, surface tension of water. So if you imagine a droplet is basically a ball, and so when you think about a ball, what a ball does when it hits something is it bounces. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to do is we modify that surface tension or lessen that surface tension, and it allows a droplet to actually flatten out on its target, right? And then so when we talk about adjuvants, you might have other things in there that are sticking agents or penetrants or those types of things. And so when you add that together, you get an optimized formulation where a droplet will actually hit and stick on your target. So if it's a herbicide, we want to stick on those weeds. If it's a fungicide, we want to stick on our crop. And then that allows that active ingredient to get in the plant and do exactly what it's there to do, right? And so otherwise, those droplets, you might have done everything right, and they might actually hit your target, and they just bounce off. And so that's you know, a miss, basically, right? And so that's something we want to optimize.
Right. And what else are growers looking at for what's in a formulation? You know, if they're going and shopping around, what are some things that they should really be looking for?
Yeah, so, I mean, for me as kind of an agronomist, like I'm going to think about efficacy first, probably. And so, you know, there's all these different things that we can optimize with a formulation, right? And so, you know, as I just mentioned about surfactants and adjuvants, and so those are going to have an effect on the efficacy of the product. And so that's a key thing. But other things can be handling characteristics. So certain active ingredients or formulations can be foamy or any of those types of things. So we will add defoamers into there, all those different things that make those formulations easier to handle for the grower. Because at the end of the day, we need those products to be able to get, you know, added into a sprayer in some fashion, whether they're dumping it in or in a chem handler, and we can't have those products not mixing with water because that's what they need to do, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty important.
Okay, so Sean, are there different types of formulations? What does that look like?
Yeah, there are, and I think that's, you know, one of the things that people may not know exactly what they mean. You know, we have on a label something might be an EC or an SC or an SN, and what does that mean, and what kind of effects can that have on formulation or performance? And so I'm going to stick to kind of the three main types we'd probably see in Western Canada. And so when you look at something that's a liquid or a solution, I guess what we would call it, so Liberty 150 is a solution. Basically what that means is that it's a substance that's dissolved in a liquid that requires no agitation. Mm-hmm. And so if you think of an example of food coloring or something, for instance, you put a couple of drops of red food coloring in a glass of water, and you might agitate it, you might stir it or whatever, and that cup is now red, and you're never going to need to agitate that again, basically, right? So it's red. So that's kind of what a solution would be. SCs, or suspension concentrates, are super common, and you know, the basic explanation of that would be that that's basically a solid that's dissolved within a liquid. But you know, the example would be hot chocolate or something, right? And so you put a couple of scoops of your hot chocolate mix in your water if you're crazy, or in your hot milk probably, mix it up, And after you crank it, or maybe it sits out, there's going to be a little bit of residue left in the bottom, and so it requires agitation is basically what that means. It's a solid that's mixed in a liquid. And then lastly, you would have your emulsions, or ECs, emulsifiable concentrates, and that's generally, you'd say that that's a liquid that's suspended in another liquid. And so best example I could give there would be a vinaigrette salad dressing. Okay. So think of like your balsamic vinegar mixed in your olive oil, mix it up. It will require some agitation, but generally it's a liquid suspended in another liquid, and it's usually solvent-based most likely. So there's a lot of different things that can, affect what formulation you might choose, and a lot of it has to do with the active ingredient, like what form is it at kind of regular room temperatures, and if it's a solid, you're kind of stuck with an SC, and there's again, a host of different considerations there, but generally what we would do is a formulation chemist would create a couple of different formulations, and then our research group would then test them against one another, and then we make a decision on which works the best, and it's kind of it's a pretty intensive process actually.
How important is it for growers to consider which formulation that they are going with?
I think it's relatively important in the fact that there can be maybe efficacy differences. So, if you have a specific brand that's been on the market for a long time, and for us, for instance, we would have like a full-on formulation chemist department, and they work on optimizing these things. And so it's pretty cool the stuff that they can do in terms of choosing the formulation. And so there might be different cost differences to them as well, I guess, for the grower. But I think I think importance in terms of choosing a formulation is just choose the one that works the best. I think that's really all that matters. And probably asking an agronomist or someone you work with is a key question there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And that was Sean McKnight on Real Agriculture.